In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, in honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to, in honor of the world host and system admin beyond the world room. Hello everyone, in today's talk, it's not that I have something to say. I am in some sense met by emotions I have of myself that about life I have that I cannot fully comprehend in this moment. However, the moment has called me forth. And there's not that much battery life, so there's going to be background to my laptop, so the background music's going to be limited, I guess, but I'm starting to wonder about the value of reality in the sense of our access to it. And I honestly feel I'm either close to a breakthrough or I need one. Recently, I have been feeling as if I am at a crossroad and I need to choose. Between a worldly destination or an unworldly destination. What I mean by this is that I don't know if I should be true to the world or I should be true to myself, or there's a way to be true to both, even though I don't see that as possible, simply because our physical experience of existence is highly conditional, but the awareness to existence comes across as unconditional. And I have come to the realization that there is not just a known self in the moment, that's what we move, but there is also the presence of the unknown. And I have spoken about the unknown for years, but it is one of those things that there was this poet named Rumi. They asked him what is love or something, and he had this poem, which it took me, I understand it now, but it took me a while to get it. He said love is like, taking off all your clothes, throwing them away and running into the forest laughing, right? It was like some next level imagery like that, And so that was a metaphor that he meant, that as if like there's a way to live where you are highly zoomed into the specifics of reality, and then there's another way to live where you take off all the ideology that has clothed your meaning, right? And you just go into the nature, into the pure nature in the presence of nature. Now, what I find also interesting as a human being raised in this world, I perceive it that an outdated biological technology, which is us, is now living in a sort of modern, unnatural technology. And so it's as if, what do we stay true to? Many people talk about life as if it can be narrowed down into like a one way to go about it. To me, it's like an all-you-can-perceive buffet. There are so many ways to move, and based on what you value. If I value myself, my behavior is different. If I value others, my behavior is different. If I value everyone, my behavior is different. If I value something that is beyond the world, my behavior to what is in the world is different. And of course, there's something very clear to me that we're here for a certain time. We're here for some time and then we leave. And it's as if every soul is burdened with wondering about how to paint their life into meaning. Do you know? Because the world gives you, like, to some degree, the outline. And your entrance or your presence in the moment colors it in, right? Now, I do understand when a person perceives anything, they need to be aware. What they bring to the tables they stand on. I personally know that I overthink. I personally know that due to the way my ethics has been positioned, the intensity of life is very different. You know, a person goes to the gym, they train, they have muscle hypertrophy, right? The fibers in their muscle kind of, once they complete a set to failure, you know, they tear, and you know, the person drinks a protein shake and gets rest, and the muscle grows, you know. Similarly, you know, I have thought that, okay, so that kind of means that we treat the brain as a muscle, but we don't, you can't consider the mind as a muscle, but I don't think it is that different, you know. That everything a person's gone through is in some sense tearing their past identity, and then once they recover, they identify with a newer, let's say, stronger identity. But it's a matter of responsibility. In these lectures, I often use this example where I say, what is the difference between a 50-year-old guy and a 5-year-old kid, right? And it's two things. One, it's the range of awareness they have, and then it's like how they engage what they're aware of. Do you know? So in other words, a child is aware of a lot of things but cannot be responsible for them, because there requires to be, of course, understanding to be able to respond to something as well. But a 50-year-old person, that person is aware of reality and is being responsible for reality and enters the deeper rooms of the experience. Now, the way I am positioned in this moment to feel anything at all is that a part of me is conflicted. You're listening to me on a day where there's a sort of thesis and antithesis, you know, going on. The thesis is live for the world. The antithesis is, if the world is not the full picture, then what are you living for? Just for a part of reality? and in some sense, what is the value of our presence, of our individual position? There are times we may not understand how the moment happens, but it happens. This world, from the beginning, has shown that it is beyond the expectations of the small. It is too big to fit in. to the to be contained. And so if a human being is living a contained conditional life and their world appears at a vastness that is unconditional, in some sense, what can that being do? It is as if we are designed to be in a world where you cannot solidify as meaning. This is not a world of statues of nouns. It is in some sense the filmography of verbs. And what is the true weight of the world? What's fascinating is there was this saying that would say everybody's fighting a battle you cannot see. What is that battle? What is the contents or the quality of that battle? And it's funny because in the outer realms there's progress, but if in the inner realms there isn't progress, how would the individual feel about the life they're in? And at the same time, there's a view that is like, okay, meaning in some sense, if it's generated by man, is limited. Like there's meaning that comes from outside of us and there's meaning that comes from within us. And then when that meaning from within and without aligns, then there is, let's say, some sort of stability. But what is that meaning? That means, as someone who has lived 12,500 days, in these 12,500 days, there has been so many different type of days. Days where I gave the day meaning, where I had expectations on the day. Those expectations happened. And then there were days where, in some sense, I tried to give it meaning. I had expectations, but in some sense, the world had to, in some sense, give them meaning. Something external was more significant than something internal. So after many days of wondering about the nature of how am I even here? What is existing to experience itself, and what is experiencing existence at all? Right? Those conclusions have led me into the realization that all of life is in some sense an interaction between the known and the unknown. And when we identify with the known first, the unknown becomes daunting. If we identify as the unknown, the known becomes daunting. But the funny thing is, when you identify as the unknown, who is it daunting to? And I am understanding more and more, a perspective that is, I don't even know if I can say if it's spiritual, right? What this perspective is similar to, imagine there was a glass orb around you, or there was this sphere of like light around you, and you were in the center of the sphere, okay? And as you're living life, okay, you are identifying with the content inside the sphere that you can make known, but there are moments you realize that the content, what you know, or what is observed as a form, and some, like, how do I explain it to you, that the content of your moment changes. And so I guess a perspective that cannot be avoided is that we find ourselves in a world that is changing too. So in some sense, the human life is as if like you've opened your eyes somewhere, that somewhere is changing. Now, if we take an evolutionary through the secular lens, we evolved unconsciously. I do understand that consciousness is an ability to modify how the world changes a little bit for yourself. But the mystery of where is this life force going? If I was to explain how I'm looking at things now compared to how it was younger. When I was younger, I was trying to solve a puzzle. I felt like a piece, and I felt like I had to fit into, this grand scheme of things. But now it has strangely simplified, where when I wake up, I notice that my body can position itself, my body can go do any action and therefore be rendered with a nature, and at the same time, there are so many ways to look at things. And what do you do when every day you wake up to an infinite multiple choice? After some point, the value of the decisions doesn't make sense, because you can see how many different ways the moment could have been. I also understood something about the nature of this reality. I guess this is for another talk, but I'll just share the insight. When a person tries to become pure and they actually pull it off, the impure gets attracted to them. It's like, let me give you an example. It's like, or it could be way more complex than I'm explaining it. And keep in mind, folks, I have blind spots. If anybody sees further, I appreciate you guys sharing it. When in actuality, what do you do when you realize it's a verb? What do you do when you realize this whole time you have been a force, moving the forms? And that is what is real. Reality is a force, folks. I think this is what I'm realizing now. We are not humans. We're not even the idea of humans. We are this unknown force that is moving it. I do understand that there is a spotlight of attention that is our consciousness. I do understand that purpose is necessary. But what I'm struggling with now to comprehend further, or the psyche that I'm in right now, and I'm aiming to go further, is I understand as a conditional entity, it's easy to find conditional purpose. As a known self, I can find a known purpose in this known world. But the issue is I have realized I'm an unknown being. All of us are unknown beings in an unknown place, as an unknown force. And it is this force's consequence that we are identifying. It is the expression, it is what this force moves. And so what is very mind-boggling to me is that, have I ever been a person, or have I been the force or the unknown moment's force that has moved that person? In other words, I can fathom a purpose for my known self. I cannot fathom a purpose for my unknown self. I cannot fathom a purpose for the unknown world. I cannot fathom a purpose for an unknown force. And when you realize it is more unknown than known, what can you do? I gave an answer in one talk called Unconditional Faith, but I'm not satisfied experientially, I guess. And so, how will the higher beings find us? How will the world turn us around in a way, or turn us around towards what we need to look at? And of course, I guess this is the nature of life. You get to see the rooms you decide to enter. Just to have this said by a member of the human species, all of it feels like it's happening in the wrong room. This doesn't feel like the main life. This feels like a parallel simulation or parallel tangent life, you know? And you know, let me tell you exactly what sort of state I find myself in. I am in the verge, let me term this, this is a very unique moment for me. I call this the drift, the crossroads to the drift. I feel I'm at a crossroad where a part of me is drifting towards a world that is present in an unknown way, and a part of me has been living in a world that has been, how would I say it, in a known conditional sense happening. And you know, yesterday, this might sound bizarre, I attended this protest February 14, and I remember I just came home and I wept for myself. The biggest question: will destiny make sense to us? And whose life am I living if I am not the forms that come and go? It's been a question for a while. Am I living in the world, or is the world living in me? Is the world here because I am keeping something here? And is it ultimately leading to release? There's this, when you go read like a book called Hagakure, the Book of the Samurai, written by Yamamoto Tsunomoto or something, that book tells the samurai that the samurai internally must die to become a fearless warrior. That internal death is the return to the presence of the unknown. And so, if a known life functions through future expectations of what conditions a person will be in, that means I'm saying, think of it this way, that you have a known being. The known being is in a known world. The known being looks at different things, knows them, and in some sense orients a purpose, okay? Has a known expectation, has a known expectation on reality. But an unknown being, imagine an unknown self. Imagine a being that doesn't know itself, doesn't know that this, even like the unknown cannot be known, realizes that. You know, due to its vastness, due to its presence. In other words, what are the expectations of an unknown being in an unknown world for that unknown world? It all feels like it comes down to either you move yourself as a condition and adapt to other conditions, or you're not a condition and you don't move it and it's automated. Believe it or not, guys, this world doesn't seem that complex. It's either automated in an unknown way or it's in some sense like manual. Do you know what I mean? Just like an automatic car, do you know? And that's the thing, you know, that a part of me like has been conditioned by culture to be like, no, how dare, you know, the free will go away. We need free will. We need to choose out of the options. But at the same time, what is the value of choosing out of an infinite multiple choice? How do you even know what to choose? So all of life, really, to me, is divided between unknownism and knownism. Unknownism, there is no self. It's an unknown force. Knownism is you are the self you choose, you're the self you're told, you're the self, you know, conditioned. And it's very bizarre because from one angle, they're like, stay true to yourself, you know, but from another angle, you need to survive in civilization. The greatest lie we've been told. We have built a civilization that we cannot be honest in. If you went up to others and said, yo, all of us are unknown beings. It's a storytelling operation. Language was a tool that now we have become and we've forgotten we've become it. People will laugh. So what does a being do if on an honest level they are unknown? And so in other words, how can an unknown honest, let's say an honesty of an unknown being, how can we function in this reality? How can an unknown self function in a known world? Because let me tell you why I'm saying this. If you see yourself as the force that has moved you rather than what's been moved, which you can from the beginning, suddenly it clicks and you're like, wait a minute, have I been me or have I been moving me? And what is the true body? That means, why is it that I am just limited to the body? Why can't the consciousness shift? Why can't I suddenly have an attention? Like, why can't I, like, I don't know how to explain it, but outside from the inner realms, I mean, just to suddenly look at things from the sky, for example, let's say a kilometer in the sky. It's specific in the same way the human being looks specific. The things that are happening to human beings are also specific, but they cannot understand that specificity, so we assign it to the higher power. But what is the higher power doing? That means, what does it actually mean being alive? Does it mean that it's all been programmed from before and just a little part of the program, you could just shift the program and feel like you were something? Is that the test? Is that the test of the higher order processes for the lower order processes to give us form? To give us a world that we can move in and feel we can change, and then suddenly realize it's all programmed from before? Madness. Oh, might of madness. Sorry, guys, I usually have, you know, an existential crisis, you know, every week. feel like I'm living in a problem that the solution is not here. In an empty room, I am looking for stuff. I'm looking for clues in an empty room. And the only clue I have found is that the room is not empty because I'm here. Even if you were in an empty room, because there's something noticing it, there's something there, but what is the value? That means, like, is free will a temporary phase of humanity in the same way like human beings had to go and find a book? You know, back in the day, they had to travel on horseback, go and find like a book in another town, read it once and memorize it and in some sense leave. Now what do? Now in some sense it's automated. You go to AI, type a question, the information comes. So to me it is very obvious, everything's becoming automated. So at what point will the human identity become automated? People don't see it, maybe because I'm fascinated by the future. My mind sees this, that a part of me feels like, okay, this doesn't make sense. And imagine, like, in a system, imagine in a train, okay, somebody puts a motorcycle, okay, imagine in a train, it has no seats or something, it's like kind of like a tunnel train. Imagine somebody moving on a motorcycle in that train, and their whole life they've been like, no man, I've been driving a motorcycle, and they're like, no man, you've been driving that motorcycle on a train. And where the train is going, it doesn't matter, because you don't have choice over that, right? I don't have choice over where the world goes. I have a choice of where I go in the world. So this is, I guess, the daunting thing for me. I am convinced everything is a simulation. Like, my body's simulated here for some time. Every day I wake up in the morning, I log in, and before I log out of the conscious waking state, that's simulated. Everything that happens in there is simulated as well. Every decision I have ever made was a simulation that entered the moment. It was simulated in the moment. But this is the thought. This is, or I shouldn't say thought, this is the view. Will free will fade in the realization that what moves everything is beyond it? That means human beings are in this world and they're like, yo, why isn't the world perfect? Or even the huge question, this is a very big question, that if you knew everything, or if you were perfect, what would you need to do? It would destroy the need for action. So perhaps, it can't make sense from here. And how long can an unknown being, an unknown soul wait to know what it truly was? Can it even? The poet Rumi said, you're not just a drop in the ocean, you're the whole ocean in the drop. I don't want to say that's non-dualism, but I'll say it this way. I was an unknown being, and then I was named, and then I identified with a role, and then I realized, the way I identify with the role can change, but the system can't change. The context of the system. It's like I could be on Earth and I could think like I'm on Venus or something. or I'm standing on Pluto, but no, I'm on Earth. That's what I'm trying to say, that the meanings we simulate are not actually the meaning of where we are simulated in. Okay? And I guess the suffering is realizing the limits of your own meaning. Honestly, I'm at this crossroad of like, you were never like, this is the viewpoints. It's like two viewpoints. One viewpoint is you've never been yourself, but you've watched yourself. That means I've never felt like me. What do I mean? There's an additional view to what we're being. Right now, like, I'm not these words, I'm saying them. They're part of my moment. Everything I see is a part of my moment. The meaning I generate conditionally is based on the relationship of these different parts of my moment. This might sound strange, but I'm pretty much saying, should I not care for anything because anything I see is not complete? Or should I care? It's like, should I care for the unknown big context, or should I just care for the known small concept? I had a hint of this, that people think it's in some sense death, okay? But death is something for the conditions of a form. If you're a conditional being, when you step out of that condition, at least in the outer realms, they call that death, right? Right now, my body's in a certain condition. My behavior is also in a certain condition. I am alive in a world that is a certain condition. To realize beyond these conditions, they are being moved beyond me. Even theologically, there are 7 higher planes, there are 7 heavens. In ancient thought, they had this view that everything goes to this sphere. I call it the central sun sometimes. And imagine the understanding of a person, like at the age of 5 to the age of 50. Like, what is the type of work that a 5-year-old can do? What is the type of work that a 50-year-old can do? It is a shift in reality. I gave a talk called Nothing is Anything. It's like from one path we go towards, being the presence of an unknown field. From another path, just a personal position, conditional one. It's like, if I was to explain it, it would be like, I can't live like a noun anymore because I've noticed everything's a verb. I can't live as a verb because there is no identity for there to live. That means it's like, what are the options? I either zoom in to my moment and I'm somebody specific doing specific things, or I zoom out and it's all automated beyond me. You know, guys, you guys don't see behind the scenes of like how I give these talks, but I'm starting to feel like there's nothing to do anymore, nothing to say. In other words, imagine right now I feel like an unknown being in an unknown moment. I've realized an unknown force has moved everything I've ever known. And now I'm like, okay. And it's also obvious because every day we wake up from deep sleep where there is no ego and we reposition ourselves into an ideological room of the ego of that day. And what will really happen? You know, it's funny. When I was younger, I have core memories of like these super early memories before I learned language, and I was just a moment. I was a moment in a room. I was the moment's. I was the moment's life. And now I feel it's returning to that. It's so funny. Last year, I had this sort of thought process. Sorry, guys, I need to drop to the stool as I'm talking. I don't know, guys. It's I don't know. I feel something is off, you know. It's like Tony Stark realizing like he's not inside an Iron Man suit that he created. It's somebody else, something else created this Iron Man suit, right? And imagine you're like Tony Stark is stuck inside an Iron Man suit, you know. And you know, maybe because life is like a bell curve, right? It's like a bell curve. But the only difference is as you reach the end of your life, you've seen this reality. That means at first we're unconsciously being an unknown moment, and at the end of life, what? We become consciously a known moment. Like how does the bell curve work, right? I'm an unconscious, unknown moment, then I become a conscious, known moment, and then I return back to the unconscious unknown. Just like a person who wears a uniform at work, and then when they leave their work, you know, they take off that uniform, and And it's like when you're out of that room you were working in. Yeah, man. Somebody in the chat section says cope. Yeah, of course. What other choice is there? But I'm trying to understand it, right? And that's the thing. It's like, how can you? Anyways, guys, give me a few minutes. I'll be back. Okay, guys, I'm back. Somebody in the chat section said cope. You know, let me tell you this. Is it easier to cope when you understand something? Or is it harder to cope when you don't understand, right? Like let me even ask the question, what is the person coping with? What are you accepting? If cope comes from acceptance, accepting your circumstance and just going through it, right? I remember, I don't know where I heard this, but somebody said the only way out of life is through it. The issue is about identity. Let me tell you, if you really want to help me, I'll tell you what it is that Alright, we just crossed 3 lanes like a pro. See, the issue is this, okay? From one perspective, it, in my honest view, everything is unknown, okay? The known is just a condition inside somewhere we don't understand. You know, it's like think of the known realities being like a room, and think of the unknown being like a giant house with so many different rooms, right? And the issue is, like, should you cope by staying in one room, like, or should you change? Or let me say it this way. Imagine you're parked in a bad spot and everybody's honking at you. Should you just stay parked there and be like, yo, man, I'm gonna cope with these honks, right? Or should you reposition yourself, right? That means the question of what are we exactly coping with? What are we trying to tolerate? I think the point I'm trying to make is it's about identity. So I don't know. I don't know if the right path is to wake up every day and be like, okay, these are just thoughts of me that pass by. I'm actually just an unknown moment that's being here. Okay. Or the person's like, no, I'm a specific known thing with specific known expectations. I'm going to go reach these specific known expectations, right? Which one? From one angle, I think one approach is dishonest, one approach is honest, but the dishonest approach is required for survival. It's like we need to untruly or falsely survive in the presence of our, let's say, unknown truth. And you can cope, I think, if you understand the situation. If you don't understand the situation, it's, again, difficult to cope. See, there's various approaches I can have. Like, I can conclude this view I'm in, but the point of it is there's this uncertainty about which way to conclude it, right? I can conclude that, okay, it's beyond me, I'll never understand it, it doesn't get better than just this, and I just gotta be this. You know what's funny? When you're a known self, you have known desires, you can have known expectations and all this. But if you were an unknown self, an unknown being, I guess the only thing left is you just watch things become known all the time by your consciousness, like in your awareness. But it could also be other reasons, The mind is very complex, it's layered. There's a subconscious, collective unconscious. But the thing I was trying to say earlier, excuse me. Let me tell you this way. I have this attitude that life gives you signs when you do the right thing. The system admin shows you or gives you signs you've done the right thing, And I'm just here thinking that what is wrong? What is wrong that a person lives for something and then they realize reality was very different than what they were living for. It's like, I'll tell you this, it's like, imagine somebody's like, I'm gonna travel to like some Atlantis, okay? And then on their way of, like, let's say traveling to Atlantis, or Lemuria, or these ancient, fictional civilizations, in the middle of it, you realize it doesn't exist. What do you do when you've spent your whole life traveling to somewhere and you realize it doesn't exist? Do you see? It's like an existential identity crisis. It's like what you were identifying with suddenly seemed hollow. This whole life, I've been 12,500 days, I've been identifying as an individual human, but these are just processes. It's like I am the awareness to these processes happening. In the same way, and think of it this way. The human being, within the scope of its consciousness, you can move your hands, your legs, you can jump, you can do parkour, but you cannot move like this. Like you cannot consciously redirect the flow of blood in your veins, like that Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon ending, right? So what this means is, this is the weird part, that our conditional lives are limited. And in a limitless world, we're functioning in a limited way. Why? And should we just cope as a limited being in a limitless world? Why? I don't mean why as in what, like we shouldn't, but why? Like what's the value? I mean, I probably shouldn't get into this, you know. Yeah, let me drift away. Let me suffer alone in this, because it has a dark angle I don't want to get to. One thing I gotta be conscious of is like looking deeply at things has to some degree been normalized for me. It might not be normal for others. Let's start from what I find in the moment, okay? This is my observation so far. Like if I was to do a reality check right now, this is what that reality check would be. I find a physical, biological body. I notice my sight starting from my eyes. It's like a 180 degree. I could see the edges of my periphery, and my mind can consider what's behind me. And yet, it's as if there has been a part of me watching me fail, succeed, suffer, and the emotions I have of myself are not coming from inside me. They're coming from this awareness that is watching the moment. There has been an unknown viewer here, an unknown presence. That means in all the stuff I've gone through, except deep sleep, it's seen it. Do you know that means they call it the witness, of course, in traditional talks, in traditional ideas, you know? But this witness has been standing there, and oh witness, what are you witnessing? An unknown being has been watching the me that I think I am the idea. Like, I don't know how to say it. If I identify as my body as the idea of me, there has been an unknown being watching this. And I've had access to that view. And so how easily am I claiming all this? I'm claiming this body, thinking it's my body. I'm claiming these thoughts, thinking I'm saying them. I'm claiming this world, thinking it's my world. How dare I when it's unknown? Perhaps the hardest thing for a known being to do is to remember the unknown doesn't go anywhere. That means you don't know, guys. This is not a fragmentation of psyche, because I'm conscious of that. I've studied it. Okay, it's more like this. That if you can look down on yourself, look up at yourself, feel sorry for yourself, feel happy for yourself, you know, pity yourself or whatever, it's as if then you're not that self that's being pitied. You're not that self, you know, that you're looking up and down on. And this is the bizarre realization. A civilization has developed, libraries of knowledge have been written, so much information has been processed, but that which is processing the information and receiving the information is not the information. And maybe I'm reaching that point of realizing the next grand chapters of the experience of this moment is not anything. That means what? Like the next chapter of life is to consciously be nothing as you witness everything? Is that what I need to be? To realize the me that I was living for was just one room out of many. In 2024, at the end of it, for the first time in my life, I had this thought. Sorry, not first time, second thought, but the second time, first time was 2015. But in 2024, I felt I was done here. Like it's 2 years, I don't understand why I'm still existing. Somebody says, how can nothing witness anything? In the same way you have been witnessing every thought you've had in this world. When I say nothing, that means it's not conditional. Doesn't mean it's not a force. I'll give you let me give you an example. An author writes a novel, the characters in that novel become conscious, okay? And then there's this one character. No, I'm giving you an explanation, bro. So in the chat section, guys, somebody says, how can nothing witness anything? I'm giving you an example, okay? Imagine an author writes, okay, an author writes a novel, or is writing a novel, okay, or has written a novel. And imagine a character in that novel, okay, suddenly realizes, wait a minute, why am I in this story? And that character suddenly wonders, wait a minute, you know, I have certain roles in this story, but I cannot change the whole story. I did not write the whole story. And imagine that character in that novel, which is still, like, imagine the author is still writing it, suddenly realizes, wait a minute, I notice that in every moment before I make my next decision, I can notice something is handwriting, okay? And then the character suddenly looks at himself and he's like, wait a minute, if there's something moving every character in the novel, writing where every character in the novel should go, from the character inside the novel, in some sense, everything or anything that's in its experience is nothing, because what is moving the novel is beyond the novel. To the character inside the novel, it is nothing. Do you understand? That means it can't be limited to what's in the story. Do you understand? That means that character can go and look at every word in that novel, every part of that novel, and in some sense it does not explain the pen that is writing it, you know, the pen that is moving the words. So that's what I meant when I say nothing is anything, in the sense that if we identify with a thing in the novel, okay, and when we realize it's being moved outside of the novel, it's another way of saying nothing is moving anything, you know, or nothing is anything, right? From the inside the novel. From outside of the novel, I do not know the hand that writes this moment. Unless the author writes that this character at this time will notice that there is, you know, you know, unless it's written by the author in the novel. And really the dilemma, like the state of mind I'm in is like, okay, man, I'm this character. I've noticed all these other characters. The rest of the characters are too busy living in the story, playing their parts in the story. And me as a character in a novel, I have no choice. The novel is written, so I will, in some sense, probably I will, the whole issue is the character cannot know how it's written, but it realizes it's being written from somewhere, you know? Somebody in the chat section says space is an illusion, the void is filled, we just cannot perceive the energy that fills it. Yeah, there's a huge philosophical argument on, can there be emptiness? Like, who can notice that? If somebody notices that, is it really empty? The other day, let me share this with you guys. The other day, I realized that everything I want from this life, okay, or desire or expect, is tied down to a self. That self gives me a feeling. Every day I wake up, it is from that feeling that that self arises. Perhaps I've reached the limits of the language threshold, you know? Perhaps these conditions, I don't know, it's just this feeling like we're not in the main room. I don't feel this is the main world. This is not the original world. It's a variation. The original reality may not be even conditional, may not be based on form. And all of our lives, it's based on form and information. How do we live? Everybody wakes up, you know, we were hunter-gatherers, you know. We were looking for new information, new things to hunt. You know, now it's the same thing. We're hunting for knowledge, for awareness, to understand things more. But is it just for, you know, psychological survival in a temporary world, or is there something more? You know, guys, a few days ago I had this dream, very notable dream, where I was in this forest and suddenly it starts to get stormy, like it starts raining. And then I see this eagle lands down and lands on my right shoulder. When it lands on my right shoulder, I close my eyes, okay? Somebody says molecules and atoms are real. If you believe something that is 99.9% empty is real, then, you know, go for it. Think of it this way. Let's say me touching a thing is real, okay? Let's say I'm touching my car right now. This is real, okay? But it is real from where? Ask that question. From where is it real? What justifies its reality? Just because we can touch something, does that mean that's the reality, the actual reality? They say a force cannot be created and destroyed, right? But the forms all change. You know, it could be, one can even say it can be seen as like It's the same elements being used to generate everyone. So in the same way we have like an alphabet, the English alphabet that leads to like, an English dictionary, in the same way we can say there's an alphabet of, like, there's the periodic table, but we can say there's even maybe an alphabet of conditions, and it's these conditions that are constantly repositioning. And you know what's interesting? Like, you have like pet owners, right? They're like a higher being compared to their pet, and their pet is living in their moment. Maybe that's it. Maybe all human civilization is like the pet. And the animal can't understand, so it can emotionally justify only. It can't analytically understand. It doesn't have a prefrontal cortex, right? Somebody says love is real. Yes. But what is real? That means define reality first, and then we make love equal to it. It is still very cool though, the fact that we're in a world that we have no clue about. Like, somebody in the chat section says, so what is real for you? That's what I'm saying, man. What is real for me is that if I was to be truly honest, we are all unknown beings in an unknown place. We're like this unknown force that is moving this known form, this form that can be known in a certain way, in an unknown place. What I see, this is the division, right? That there is a way you can look at life. Everything is more unknown than known, or you can ignore the unknown and reduce things to the limits of the known, right? And I'm someone you're listening to someone who's in some sense bored of reducing everything to the known, and is wondering about, okay, how does an unknown being live in an unknown world? Okay, and for that, it seems not to have a sort of analytical conclusion, explanation, right? I found something very interesting, guys. In the dictionary, okay, yes, it's the same letters, but you have different words. But when you go and read the definition of a word, it's using other words in the dictionary. Do you know? It's kind of like, strangely, a new definition is dependent on other words previously defined to give it its definition. And now take that a bit further. Think as if every person you have met is a word, and they are a condition, and they're being defined by other conditions. That's why I'm saying, imagine there's an alphabet of conditions, or I gave a talk called the alphabet of values, I think, like months ago. And it's very fascinating because, sorry guys, just a second. What was I going to say? Think of it this way. I'm on the verge of deciding to let go of every idea that I have thought I've been, and to just, accept that, all right, it's unknown, and that's it. Somebody says you're bored with limitation. Yeah, man, it loops. Have you noticed? Have you like, if you think of it in years, which is a distraction, you don't notice it. But if you think of it in days, okay, if you go and calculate how many days you've lived on this planet, okay, And just consider how many different days you've looked at life, so it can't be any of those views, because there's been different ways to look at it. It's good though. I'm at some sort of roadblock right now. Everything feels so small to me. Let me tell you in what sense. Being a human being, it's become equivalent to being in theater. I've never been on like a theater stage, but I'm saying like I did graduate from film school, and I know I've talked to actors and whatnot. I've seen actors. And it's just, I've reached this point where I'm just wondering, like, I can still go and act in this world and whatever, go take a role and be that, which is, you got to do it to survive. But I'm trying to think if survival is a distraction from what is actually going on. And I guess I can conclude it in one way now that if I have been living as a known self in a known world, and every day I've woken up and my life's been occupied with trying to know and connect the relationships and different elements in this kind of known system, maybe this is the reality of an unknown life. Maybe I've played my hand too well. Maybe there's been enough of a sense of me in my experience. Maybe I need to surpass being me, being an idea anymore, becoming raw force. I had this when I was young. I have a twin brother, and he would always choose like the knight warrior, right? And I would always choose the mage archetype. And ever since when I was young, I would even, like, I think I was 14, I would, like, I remembered research, like, going online and looking at this forum, and they were talking about how to do telekinesis, right? How to move things with force and stuff. This was even before I knew what Star Wars was, you know? And, or it might have been after, I don't know actually. But whatever it was, I felt like I was fascinated by an ability to control or be a force. Like, see, right now, nobody has a problem with moving our body. We don't get scared if somebody moves their body. But if somebody raises their hand and, like, a cup of tea raises into the air, right, everybody's going to be like scared, right? But we don't get scared when an unknown force moves the biological body, because we've made that known. I'm pretty much saying that the other option is like just being present as force. Maybe that is the actual reality. Maybe us being people is the result of the force, and the actual life is just being a force, an unknown force. Maybe that's the final acceptance. Everything is unknown. Somebody says it's difficult not to fear in the unknown. In the chat section, they say, though I have heard that, sorry, my phone's upside down, so the microphone's doing it. Though I have heard that perfect love casts out fear. By perfect love, do you mean God's unconditional love? Because human beings are not perfect beings. So I don't know how they can have perfect love. You know, I'm trying to think, like, let's look at it this way. They say from the 300,000 years ago, when civilization was considered to begin, there has been around 117 billion people. Okay, what does this mean? This means that we have this class of human. We have the human class, okay, the human race, right, the human design, but there's so many different variations of human beings arising, okay, and these human beings, none of them are the same. And why? Why not have copies of human beings, right? Because all of them seem to be scouts, and they seem to be expanding the scope of human expression. That means if you look at it from the view of human expression, there has been 117 billion different types of human expression on this planet. Okay, now the viewpoint I had was like this, that okay, so if human beings are being born to all express in different ways, then this changes the narrative of all of us trying to fit into a survival that gives us a specific fixed value, and realizing that it's like the purpose of, like, oh my god, I think I understand. Oh my god, I see it. It is the life of the species. If we make ourselves significant, I don't think it understands. Like, let me tell you this way: 117 billion different types of human beings that has been expressed by this world so far. That's equivalent to, imagine this whole species being one being, and these are all its different expressions, right? So every human being that is being born, right, it's like this species not repeating its expression, not having the same thoughts the next day. You understand? Whoa, somebody says, if God is omnipresent, how can God not be in your heart? I don't know what I said that gave across the view that God is not in my heart. But the issue is about the limits of what we can know. Okay? From a perspective, theological lens, at least in Islam, they say God is closer to you than your jugular vein. From many ways I've explained it in these lectures. Imagine like a bunch of ants at a library table, or imagine a politician giving a speech and there's an ant on the podium, you know. So in some sense, we are close to God in the same way that we are in the attention of. Everything is in the attention of. We're within the divine surveillance state, right? But the thing I'm talking about is more about my human function, okay? And I've reached this point where I'm trying to explain to myself, like, okay, man, all right, if you're if the unknown has been moving the known, and you've been identifying as the known. Ah, that's how you're saying it. See, but how would I know? You see, let me give you an interesting argument. So somebody in the chat section, and thanks guys for engaging. I appreciate it all the time, always. So somebody in the chat section says, if God is omnipresent, how can God not be in your heart? Then you have perfect love. See, think of it this way. If I ask you, do you know what perfect love is? You don't. God is the only one who knows what perfect love is. God is the only one that is all merciful. God is the only one that truly can see what's in your heart compared to what others can see. Okay? Right? So if I assume that I have perfect love, it's like I'm assuming I'm God, and I'm not God. And I don't opt into this view that we all are God either. Okay? That's something, I think it's a New Agean ignorance, or the Buddha was, had a purpose, but it wasn't the full purpose. I don't opt into non-dualism. I know that non-dualism is escapism it's the ego's last refuge of making the unconditional equal to the conditional, so you forget they're both there. See, the thing is, if I believe in God, I do not assume I know God. I do not humanize God. Okay? Do you know, I do not limit God to my awareness. Do you know, God is beyond my awareness. If God has any attribute, it is beyond any human attribute. Okay? Now, granted, some people say, like I do understand from a Christian perspective, people who treat Christ as, they say God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, and God the Father, right? So I do understand that when you look at Christ, for example, Prophet Christ, peace be upon him, when you look at him, you are in some sense acknowledging not his human nature. You are worshiping that divine nature. Do you know, you're worshiping that soul's closeness to the truth, right? But also, the Christians consider Christ to be God, right? The only way that makes sense, because I'm Muslim, for me, the perspective is that God does not have an equivalent. That's the biggest sin in Islam, by the way, right? That you make the unconditional equal to the conditional. But from the God's point of view, God can do anything. That means, from the human angle, from the human side of the coin, I cannot perceive God as Christ or any of you as God, okay? But from God's perspective, God can be anything. God can do anything, right? God is not limited to being Christ, but we from here are limited to see Christ as God. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's something like saying the outside of the box was inside the box. Then it's, in some sense, how are you even believing in a world then? If Christ is God, how can the world exist? How can you be in the world? Didn't God create the world? That means the creator of the creation is beyond the creation, right? And I'm not saying that love is not, love is whoever it, like this. So, bro, whoever's saying perfect love and all that, that is, go towards love, right? Do you know? But I'm saying that when you realize you're an unknown being, it becomes harder to identify with the known. That means it is very clear to me. My body is within my experience. I'm experiencing not just my body, all the stuff outside of my body. And what's fascinating is that the human being moves from within to without. Or think of it this way, you receive information from outside of you, you process that information inside of you, and then from inside of you, you select a strategy and then you implement, right? Guys, this is a very bad thing for me. This is a negative thing for me to say, but I don't know why. I feel I've been alive too long. Bravo. Somebody says, I don't know, though. I do know that when I see acts of love, it makes me happy. You know, that is beautiful, but I will say this. Do you know that for evil people, when they see evil acts, it makes them happy? Makes some of them happy? You know, you're, whoever's writing in the chat section, you're in a good state. I in no way feel invalidated by what I say. You know, walk towards, you know, the greater love you can find. It's a blessing. It's truly a blessing. You know, it's like a person who doesn't have a car sees people with cars. It makes him happy, you know. He's like, others are getting places, you know, the species is advancing. But when you don't have a car, all you can do is just walk or buy a bicycle. I don't know. And maybe, you know, all the religions are saying it. All the secular conclusions lead to this. From the secular perspective, they're like the human comprehension of the vastness of everything is limited, of course. And from the religious angle, you know, they say, you know, they say that God knows the unseen only. And so, as a player in a game that I didn't know I signed up to play, it's like after 12,500 quests, you're like, okay, this is a little too much. See, a part of me honors the human species. I understand the importance of staying humanized. But also, I think experientially, in the same way a person outgrows a t-shirt or something they used to wear as a kid, similarly, I also feel that my experience of my I feel if my existence and my experience were two circles, okay, I feel the circle of my experience is way bigger than the circle of my existence. And so the circle of my existence doesn't satisfy. It's like a part of me wants to know. It's like I figured out existence. Okay, now I'm trying to figure out the experience. The experiencer comes to an unknown moment. And now I'm looking at this unknown moment and being like, now what? You know? And why did that ego land on my right shoulder? Like, I'll never understand. Well, not I'll never understand, but I really don't know what that dream meant. If anybody knows what eagles landing on your shoulder in a dream means, like, let me know, yo. Anyways, guys, you know, thank you for the person in the chat section reminding me, you know, that I'm not here to, you know, make people unhappy. So let me say some happy things, you know, regardless of my existential crisis. That's my own personal thing, you know. I'm actually no stranger to the solitude of the moment. So I come and give these talks, you know, give this talk as an expression, you know, but I have had a ridiculous amount of training in accepting what I can't get. Pretty much, guys, you know, it's either a personal project or it is, you know, an impersonal project. I've reached the point where I'm convinced it's an impersonal project. It's all really coming down to being a play of forces, and, you know, we can choose to personalize them, like make them specific, but in reality it's just stuff happening. It's stuff happening with the order of what seems to be a higher mind. Like, if I was a thought of a higher mind right now, it's like I think that higher mind is like, all right. Maybe the world that I've been living in, like imagine learning a language in some, like there's words in other, I'm bilingual, so there's words in like one language that they don't have in other languages, you know? I honestly feel like I'm overstaying in this world. I don't know why. I am supremely bored. I am supremely bored of all of this. How many times do I see this? Same stuff. And I don't know why my mind keeps it's like -7 here, or right today. I mean, it's warmer, it's -3, I think. My hand doesn't freeze outside of the car window. You know, maybe I'm done being Amin Jabbar Ansari. Maybe I'm done being myself. You know, imagine somebody who's very skilled at something, right? Or, for example, like, you know, they say this about work culture, right? That somebody who's really good at their job, they don't grow. No, or let me say it this way. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Imagine somebody is, I don't know, being a great waiter, okay, right? It's as if when the company looks at them, they're like, this person is a great waiter. Like, we need them to stay as a waiter, right? So that person doesn't get, let's say, promoted to manager or something. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of feel like, you know, I've seen existence, and it's like my whole life I've been gripping this existence and identity. But now, what is it for? Like the biggest question in my mind is who, what's the final evaluation? Like, whatever life I live, the conclusion of it, what gives that value? And I guess it's very difficult being inside the box, and once you step outside of the box, you're like, yo, man, nothing inside the box could give me the value I see now, I guess. All right, guys, let's think of things to cheer up the audience. This was probably a depressing episode for some. All right. What's funny about the moment? I think it's pretty funny that we're all like unknown beings acting like we know what's going on. you know? I think it's also kind of funny. It's kind of funny that like a person can live whatever life they want, but the final value of that life is not limited to the type of life they've lived only. I think it's funny that there's so many infinite ways to like there's so many ways, countless ways to look at something, and we just choose one, and then we zoom into that room thinking like that's the meaning of it all. I saw this video, it was so funny. It was like stick figure animations, okay, and God was like, they depicted God sitting on a cloud, and then there were a bunch of people, and in it, on the title of that like short clip, it said that when God keeps giving you like, toxic girlfriends to for character development, right? And then they're showing this moment where there's this, you know, stick figure god with a beard like on a cloud, and the god, and they're like, God, what do, okay, and the god's like, all right, let me think, and he's like, suddenly the god's I wish I could find that video and send it to you guys. Like, and then God in that video says, okay, give him another toxic one. And everybody's like, God, why? Like this poor guy, you know, he's gone through, you know, he's like, why keep bringing another toxic relationship into his life? You know, and God suddenly shouts at everyone. It's like, you guys don't know. I created him. I'm giving him another toxic woman to, you know, for character development, right? And it was so funny. You know, and God was saying, I love him, that's why, you know, he needs to go and see that toxic bit, and then the big clip ends. You know, it was really funny. Let me see if I can find it. Anyways, I'll post it in the comments later. But you know, I don't know why, since my youth, I've had this feeling of, I don't know how to say it. It's a noble feeling. I felt, oh system admin, why not let me see? Why not let me see what's going on? Yeah, exactly. I felt worthy. Well, that's what I'm trying to get to by the noble feeling. I felt worthy to know what's actually going on. And whether the unknown is a veil or it's the truth, either way, it's, for me, it's way more convincing that I'm more unknown than known. That means when you notice it's all a simulation, why are you still in the simulation? It's no longer for yourself. I think that's it. There is no self to live for anymore if it's more unknown than known. So what does an unknown being live for in a known world? I guess the unknown world. Maybe that's it. I gotta live as an unknown being in an unknown way for an unknown world, all meanwhile within a known simulation. All right, guys, that's. I think I should end the talk here. If there's any questions or if anybody wants to say anything before I end, while I chug some water, you guys can think. You know what, guys? I'm gonna read one of my own poems. Actually, let's pick a random poem of mine. I have what, like 3%, 6% battery. All right. Somebody says perhaps you need to travel more. Yeah, man. I think what you're trying to say is you need to travel more, see the suffering of reality, and then realize you're not suffering. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Because I am that the my the it's what I'm communicating is more about an emotion that I cannot assign to anything. You know, more than in some sense me not knowing the scales of reality. I have seen, you know, suffering. I'm not ignorant of that. You know. I remember reading into Mother Teresa, how she would go in Calcutta and hold those starving children out, and how this dude came there and the guy ordered a bottle of water, right? And then Mother Teresa, the guy ordered 2 bottles of water for himself, and Mother Teresa was like, "You POS." Like, Mother Teresa, like, scolded that guy. I do understand that there is intensities of life, but see that you're listening to someone talking about from a philosophical perspective. I'm wondering about it's a question of meaning. I am not ungrateful. I am not, you know. I'm just saying that it's a state. It's like the state of consciousness I'm in. It's become more unknown than known, and I don't know what to do with that. You know. But I will be traveling actually. Ah, you were saying somebody says I was more thinking of in a sense of enjoying yourself. That's a very that's a hard task for me. It's been like that. But I enjoy these talks. These talks have been a very beautiful part of my life. Even though there's moments where I'm like, should I regret spending so much time on them? And then I'm like, no, maybe in the far future, in the middle of a battlefield where, human beings are fighting AI, there's going to be some dude listening to these talks and like, it's going to like cheer them up a little bit maybe. Maybe aliens will one day listen to these talks and they're going to be like, yo, this guy said some interesting things back then, you know? The task is to serve, because serving yourself is based on how you set the condition, but serving others is more specific, right? That means Mother Teresa had fed, like, she had ate food like from the beginning of her life, right? But when she saw others who hadn't ate food, she was like, okay, that's messed up, right? And her soul, like a general, like a celestial general, just marched into that poverty-stricken place. I'll never forget this picture I saw online. It was, I think, in some African country. They showed this guy they showed this kid who was like legit, the kid's skin was like connected to his bones, right? And he couldn't even move from the ground. And there was some guy walking with a bag of rice, and the kid's arm was just reaching up a little bit towards that rice. And underneath it, somebody wrote, "What if this world is another world's hell?" Right? Which was very heavy. But I believe this world is a simulated event. And this isn't the original world. This isn't the original world. This isn't the original Earth. You know what it feels like? It feels like, imagine, somebody creates something that's original, and then you give AI to make versions of that, right? And imagine now you gave an original world, and now there is so many different AI imagined variations of that original world, like as simulated worlds, and those worlds feel real, but they are not fully real, you know? Somebody in the chat section says, love is my medicine. Maybe you're right. Maybe I should love the unknown. Even though I don't know what I'm loving, but you know, I don't know who's loving and loving what, but maybe at the end of it, it's an emotional reconfiguration rather than an ideological one, you know. So guys, I don't know if you know this, I've written a ridiculous amount of poetry books. They're on Amazon. Okay, I wrote this years ago. I think 25 each, like maybe above 20 poems. I'm gonna go and find one of those, and I'm gonna read a random poem out of a random one, and I'm gonna see what it says. All right, this is gonna be a cool moment. I wrote these poems in 2015, 16. I was such, guys, you don't like, I wish I had a camera to show it to you, but I have a next level life in writing. You know, I was a writer before I was a speaker. All right, so let me go to my email and find this, and we're gonna read some random poems I wrote years ago. Okay, guys, I came to read a poem for you. I connected the data to my laptop and then it glitched. So I came home now. Let me read a poem for you, and then I'll end the lecture. Okay? All right. Okay, so I have 6 of my books here. Heaven's Halo, I Am Nobody, Kites of Old, My Solaris, Endless Roads, Rahmana. I'm feeling Endless Roads. All right. I'm feeling number 7. All right. 2, 3, 4, 5. Where is it? 6, 7. Okay. This is the poem I wrote 2016. So comes the sage. So comes the sage, dancing in the folly that is a reminder of the shadow and the dark side of the moon. We write as much as we can until we no longer can. What is the meaning of this? Through the art found on the cave wall, what gives light to the shade that the tree provides once the fruits of light are ready to be picked? These poems are not poems, they are moments unborn. Give this precious world an allowance it has never had before. Listen to the whisper of cosmic prowess. A tired man may not see the excitement of mankind. How do we find truth in a world made of lies? Once you go within, even nonsense will make sense. When you speak, who is it that truly listens? How do we find truth in a world made of lies? Once you go within, even nonsense will make sense. When you speak, who is it that truly listens? All right. And then I'll read one more. It's a very short poem. It's called Sooner Than Soon. Sooner than soon, earth and ether shall dance together forever. Could the divine be beyond time? Could the heart beat infinitely? Sooner than soon depends on who's asking. Who is asking? All right, I'm going to read one more from a different book.
from Rahmana. I'm getting number 2. Let's see number 2. What is that even? Okay, it's called, the poem is from the poetry book Rahmana. It's called Centennial Pride. Centennial Pride, that's the title. Beyond sentiment, all are capable of absolute observance. The world is not an ignorant shape. How does mystery climb the staircase of ambience? Do not be convinced by what meets the eye of the eye. There is no road when all existence walks within you. What is more consistent than a sun that doesn't want to set? If you've noticed ocean waves, what makes your breathing any different? Live in such a now that when the wind blows, change happens formlessly. All pride is an excuse to exist without the precious gems of the heart. What gives hope to the hopeless when hope must originate from you? How do free people free the people? Live in a clarity that never left the heart. Live in a clarity that never left the heart. I think to conclude this, folks, what this is saying is, yeah, maybe I'm kind of done with analyzing reality, and I should just, become an emotional mess. I'm joking. Live in a clarity that never left the heart. Maybe I should, rather than be living in accordance to my personality, I should just live in accordance to my presence. Anyways, folks, thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful, in honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to. Thank you for engaging with the episode, and have a great day. Thank you.